Welcome back, everyone, to the Sobriety.Matters podcast. It's been a short but a long 4 months since the last episode. I took a unscheduled and unplanned break in between these episodes, and it was a good break. Lots of RVing, 6 or 7 state parks in the state of Indiana with my wife and the kids. It was absolutely fantastic downtime, and also did a little bit of Pee Wee football coaching with some K through 2 kids, which was absolutely incredible, and have been busy. But I'm gearing back up here for the rest of this year. I've got some really excellent guests coming on, and in this episode, episode number 5. We're going to start with Miss Gentry. Gentry is also known on the social media platforms as Life with Gentry. Many of you probably already follow her. If you don't, you need to. She's an absolute riot. She is such a great follow, very positive, and has some absolutely epic posts. So in this episode, in speaking with Gentry, we dive into all the way back to 5th grade and where she thinks that some of these things started for her. And as we all learn in alcohol addiction and addiction as a whole, there's oftentimes those underlying pieces of when they start. And in this conversation with Gentry, it goes back to 5th grade. We talk about building a community and realizing that she needed to do that, and how she didn't. And then we also take a look at what's that community look like now for her. She has what I will call an extremely large community in social media. And we talk about how she handles that, and how that helps her, and how that helps her with her self-awareness. That's one of the other key pieces that we touch on. That's one of Gentry's main focuses in her sobriety. So I want to warn you that my microphone was a little hot during the interview. Gentry sounds great. Mine was peaking and turned up just a little bit too loud, but I think it'll come through all right. And I'm not the main focus anyway. We all want to hear the guest story, so hopefully it doesn't annoy you too much. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in and have a little conversation with Gentry. All right. Welcome to the show, Gentry. I appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to join me on the Sobriety Matters podcast. Really, really looking forward to this episode. Being in the Instagram and social media world, and following along with you, and being in a sober group that I help run on Facebook. I think a lot of those people are excited for this episode too. They love you and follow you, and they were super excited to hear that you're coming on. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited.
Cool. So let's start with a little bit of an intro. Let's learn kind of who you are. So where are you from? What's your daily life look like? Talk about those wonderful kiddos you got, and just learn a little bit about you.
All right. So I am from Central Washington in a really, really small town. And my daily life is like chewing Oreos while trying to brush your teeth at the same time. I got 4 kids and it's constant chaos. But yeah, I mean, that's my life in a nutshell, is eating Oreos while brushing your teeth, like constantly trying to get ahead while constantly have something pulling me back. But I love it. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome. And you mentioned 4 kids, but what you didn't mention is it's 4 boys. I think is correct, which is chaos. I'm sure. I mean, being a boy myself and knowing what I did when I was little, and I was the only one. I can only imagine what 4 of those little mongrels are up to. So I'm sure it's more than just Oreos brushing your teeth. So it
Yeah,
could,
it's four boys, and the youngest two are twins. So that's a whole nother set
yeah,
of chaos
boy,
when you got
yeah,
twins.
yeah, you really got it going on over there. That is awesome. So you mentioned Central Washington, small town. So I do have to ask, how small of a town are we talking? I'm small town Indiana, so I like to talk about small towns here.
Small town. So it's I think we're about like 2,500 people in my town.
Oh, yeah, you're right in the heart of small town. So now,
Yeah.
was your high school really small, or?
Yeah, we graduated. I graduated with like 85 people. I think we were the first class to hit over 100, but then at the end of the year we lost some. So I think only 85-ish walked. But
Awesome.
how small was it? How big's your town?
We're in good company. So I grew up in a town of about 3,200 ish people, just northwest of Indianapolis here in Indiana. Um, I graduated. I said 52, and I think I've been saying 52 since I graduated, which was 21 years ago. But a kid corrected me that was in my class last night. I think it was 62, and it's kind of sad because I was the class president that I didn't know that number was what it was. So yeah, so 62. So we're in very good company. And then I lived in Indianapolis for 10 to 12 years, but now we're in a really small town southeast of Indianapolis, and it's about 1,200, if it's even that big. And my son's in kindergarten, and as of right now, his class is around like 42-ish, 46-ish. So yeah. So right, right in the heart of small town America. It's awesome. So let's dive into just your story a little bit. Let's start from early drinking, progression to when did it really become the issue? Um, how do you relate around, alcohol, and just kind of let you tell your story here.
All right. Well, I love sharing my story because I feel like every time I share my story, I discover something else about myself. And sharing this story a couple times, I've realized that like fifth grade was kind of a big turning point for me. And my son, my oldest son, is in fifth grade right now. So, and maybe just relating him to me is what's kind of helped me identify this too. But my parents were separating at this time, and my parents were both teachers. I had a really good childhood growing up, no trauma. The youngest of three, and played all the sports, was active. Fifth grade though is when I feel like, and actually there was on another podcast I did with, I can't think of the name of it now, but they talked about the how fifth grade is a really turning point, and that's when mental health really starts to kick in. So it's really really helpful for parents to know that fifth grade is a good time to start really watching your kids. But I started feeling a lot more anxiety, where I started feeling like my friends were watching me a lot more closely maybe, or that they were judging me more, or I wasn't fitting in with everyone. And there's a lot more depression of where I was like pulling back from friends. I think the parents' divorce had some to do with that, but I think also just hitting that age, just starting to hit that age. I have a family history of mental health, it's like depression and anxiety and some addiction. Um, but that was the first time I felt suicidal, in fifth grade. And I've never talked about that because this is the first time it's kind of, I'm bringing it up because it's important, I think, for parents to understand how early that can start happening. And it wasn't necessarily even this feeling of like wanting to die. It was this feeling of wanting to not live the way I felt, in the way I felt anymore, if that makes sense. Because I think in that age, you don't really understand the whole thing that you're feeling. And when that started happening, and then the parents' divorce starts happening, and then I had a little bit of bullying in like sixth grade, seventh grade rolled around, and I had a girlfriend offer to sneak into her parents' liquor cabinet while they were in bed. And that was the first time I drank. And then seventh grade rolled around, and I have my first drink of alcohol. And I remember it just feeling like lighter and numb and happy. And I didn't I wasn't in my head about if she liked me or if she didn't like me. We were just enjoying ourselves. You just get that first high, that first numb. And it didn't go off the rails right away. You know, some people like, I had that first drink and then I was dropping out of school. No, I was still a 3-point sport athlete. I was still an ASB. I still did all the things, but I knew that alcohol and drugs, because then in high school I started doing like smoking weed, and I knew that they were a number. I knew that they made me laugh without thinking about if anyone was watching, then made me think I was funnier and gave me an excuse to just live and not constantly be in my head. After high school, though, that's when it started to really go off the rails. When I didn't have the sports to show up for, when I didn't have the parents to check in with, when I didn't have all the teachers watching me, because growing up in a small town, we know that you know everybody. So if you screw up, like so and so is gonna tell your parents. So college is when it started to turn into a lack of control in my drinking. And college, I got alcohol poisoning in the first quarter. Is also when I tried cocaine, and just kind of was then the internal battle of, I don't want to live like this anymore, but I don't know how to not live like this anymore. It started to really happen. Then 21 rolled around, and I decided that now that I'm drinking age and I can go to all these bars legally, I can't do this anymore. I was just completely out of control, and I put myself in rehab. So rehab at 21 was supposed to be my like check box, alcohol's done, we're moving on. But I didn't really go deeper and heal and and work on the mental health and work on the depression and really like submit to sobriety. It was more of I thought that this would be my quick fix. I thought if I just took a break from alcohol for 30 days, I wouldn't crave it anymore. I could just move on with my life. And then I ended up getting pregnant shortly after that. And so that kept me sober, because now I'm pregnant, and I moved back home to my small town. And I thought after the rehab and becoming a mom and getting a little bit older, out of the party scene of college, that I could start drinking again. And then I started drinking again, and I constantly battled it, or it was a constant. I'm not every single time I drank, I got out of control. But every single time I drank, I had to think about not getting out of control. There was never I'm done. It was like, I better say that I'm done because everybody else is saying they're done. And I think that that's a huge thing to recognize for people that are at that gray area of drinking, where you might not get so bad that you're burning your life to the ground or whatever, but you know in your head that the way you're thinking about alcohol doesn't feel right, doesn't feel good. So I did that struggle back and forth. Then had another kid, was saved by the pregnancy once again. Got a nice 9-month break. And then once I returned back to drinking, I got a DUI after that, son. And that was a lot more of like, okay, I'm really going to take this serious this time. And that lesson learned with that one is that you really have to surround yourself with people that also are going to take it serious. I think that I thought that I could just quit and not talk about it and just do my therapy and just kind of be in my own world, and then I would be fixed. And that wasn't the reality. Like I needed more people to know. I needed more people, because the more people that know, even if it's a support group of people that are struggling with the same thing, the more accountability you have. And I ended up drinking again, though, because I didn't build that community around me, and got out of control again, and then I got pregnant with the twins. So I just I decided during the twins pregnancy, I was going to also get back on track. Every pregnancy, I was like, okay, this is going to be a good jump start to sobriety. But postpartum depression and not dealing with my mental health, and now the the depression of having 4 kids, the anxiety of having 4 kids, I went to the tool that I had in my toolbox, which was alcohol. And the twins were 2 months old, 3 months old, and I just hit a point of just complete hopelessness. And that first year of their life was my worst year drinking. But thankfully, a week after their one year birthday, I got sober for good, and that was the last time.
That is awesome. So there's a lot in there. We could go a lot of different directions. I think the one thing that you mentioned and you started with, that for anyone that's listening, you, you know, you're so open with your sobriety, with your recovery, on your platforms through social media and other things. I mean, it's daily. I mean, you're constantly, talking about it. But one of the things that is incredible to me is that you find those new things every time you tell your story. And even just here, you told a part of your story that you said you've never really even shared. And I think that's so important for everyone that's listening, that you don't have to be ready to tell your story in your first 30 days, your first 90 days, your first year. And for some, it that may never come. But don't be afraid to think about telling your story, because it not only starts to heal you, by putting that voice out there, but the response that you get once you start to tell your story is what is the huge surprise. And what you then start to see, and you can grow in your recovery with this, is that your voice is so important. And even though your story sounds so unique, and it is unique because every person is, but so many other people are doing the exact same things that you are. And so I loved that you hit on that piece, that every time I tell this, there's something else, and you actually dove into that. So, fifth grade, that's pretty early, and obviously you didn't know that back then. And I was going to ask you, have you read the book, Addiction Inoculation? That I think her name's Jessica Lahey. That it's not that old of a book, but it's an interesting book, that sets that time frame, that she starts talking about it even at like kindergarten age. Of, you don't really talk to them about it, but you have it, and you bring it into their world the way that you need to at that. But around that fifth grade, sixth grade, and it goes into how the DARE program worked, and why, there's a lot of science in it. So I just wanted to mention that book, and it's really good because it hits on all of that stuff for you, which I think is really cool. So rehab at 21, 30-day stint, I think you said. Is that correct?
As that one was 21.
21. Okay. And you brought up another point there. It sounds like, and I don't want to assume this, but it sounds like you did a run of, um, dry sobriety, not real sobriety. You basically were dry, not drinking, and didn't work on those pieces. When you came out of that rehab stint, did you do AA, or did you continue through any sort of a, like intensive outpatient or anything like that?
No, I went to AA meetings probably off and on for a couple months. But no, it really did feel, I really felt like this is a problem that I'm just going to solve really quickly. And I needed a break. I just needed I was exhausted. And so I thought, if I just can get away for a little bit and get this break, I will feel better. And then I'll be able to get back into fitness and get back into being healthy. And then I won't crave it. Then I won't want it. Then I'll want that life, the happy, healthy lifestyle. And I did want it, but I didn't. Community is huge. I didn't build a community ever until I this time around.
Yeah, and it sounds like when the DUI occurred as well, it sounds like you had potentially learned that that community was important, but it still wasn't there for you. And doing that hard work, I think, is really where I'm getting here. For anyone that's listening in early sobriety, or even just sober curious, that it that hard work is what's going to make this thing stick. And that hard work comes in many different forms. It's going to AA and submersing yourself there. If AA isn't your thing, it's building a social community. It's finding an online community, which in the COVID world now is amazing. We all used to have to drive to our basements in the church, which is the stigma that everybody has around AA. And that's how we did it. But now there's so many options out there with all these different clubs and things that you can join online and do these types of Zoom meetings and all that stuff. So that's been awesome. Now let's talk about building community around social media. You have a very large social media following, and I guess my question to you is do you feel like that's your community to help with sobriety right now?
Absolutely. Like it's a huge, the social media is a huge part of my sobriety, um, because you can reach so many more people, and that feeling of just not being alone. And I don't think that everybody has to shout it from the rooftop like I do. I know that like that's not everyone's comfort zone, and I respect that. But you can still follow and connect with people without having to share about sobriety on your page. Like just following them, like what you have in your feed is how you're going to feel. So whether you're sobriety or not, like what you're following, what you're ingesting in the social media world is going to start to sink into who you are and who you want to be. So if you're following the gossip, if you're following trashy like reality TV articles, which I mean, I love my trashy reality TV, don't get me wrong, but if that's what you're scrolling through every night, that's what you're going to start to, that's how you're going to start to treat things. So if you're following things that are positive, you find the motivational speakers, you find the entrepreneurs, you find the people recovering out loud, um, the people you want to feed off of, like the energy you want to feed off of is really, really important. And you don't have to have a large social media following to benefit from social media.
No, that's a great point, and I think because of how large you've grown yours, I think there's some advice that even for myself I'm going to ask you, and that is social media itself already today is being looked at as an addiction, potentially. And so I guess I ask you, how have you monitored that yourself, knowing that you have that addiction piece inside of you? Because I went down that path. I too went to detox and came out of rehab, and social media has always been a thing for me. I was a social media manager in the company that I'm at now years ago, and I've always been a big sharer on social media. And what I saw is I made that huge shift, and I made it quick to all sobriety, and to where all I was getting was sobriety, 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 because I switched my account and like just started following everything. So what any advice around how you manage that to not overwhelm yourself with nonstop sobriety? Because that, I think, in early recovery could drive somebody to madness. So what what was your path there? I mean, how does that work for you?
That is so funny. Like you're scrolling, you're like, if I see one more, one day at a time, I'm gonna lose
Yeah.
my freaking mind.
Yes.
Well, I mean, we have addictive personalities. We have addictive personalities. So you're never gonna be able to fish like totally turn that off. I don't believe that you are ever healed of that. I think that you have to now channel that. And so um you have to be present in your life. So if you're feeling like it's gotten to the point where it is not serving you or your family or your life or your household, if things aren't getting done because you're so consumed with with social media, then you need to recognize that. I mean, the biggest thing in sobriety is self-awareness. So I spend a lot of time on social media. I spend a lot of time creating content for social media. Um, and for people that might be an addictive thing that I'm doing that, but I have to be self-aware when it's consuming me. If I start to feel like my mood is shifting a lot because I lost followers or I gained followers, then I need to take a step back. So that being self-aware is like the key, I feel like, to mental health and sobriety and addiction and anxiety in anything. And I feel like that's what is so awesome about addiction, and so awesome about having to have gone through what I have with addiction, because I get the opportunity to be self-aware because I have to be self-aware. There's so many people that don't get to go that deep, go that focused on making themselves grow, that they can just coast through life and they're just missing out on so much. And so self-awareness and how you feel when you're on social media is a huge thing you need to pay attention to.
And for anyone that is sober curious and listening to this, she is not crazy, because I too often say how awesome addiction is. Because awesome and addiction don't generally go in the same sentence until you're talking to someone that's in recovery. Because once you see this side of it, you realize it is awesome that I did go through that scenario, and I had that in my life to get me where I am. Could it have been different? Absolutely, but I wouldn't change anything that I did in the past to get to where I am, because in a way I'm better for the experience. We all have our rock bottoms, and some are worse than others, but if we're all still here and we're upright and breathing and we're working on it every single day, that addiction was awesome and got us to where we need to be, from that standpoint. So that was killer. I don't think I've heard anybody say I that's why I think addiction is awesome. Love
Yeah,
that.
I mean, I think I'm a 10 times better mom because I've gone through what I have. I think that you have a different emotional intelligence to be able to recognize things. It's just, um, yeah, I recommend addiction. No.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I think better parents, better employee, just in general, just a better person. And when we say that, we're not saying, "Oh, I'm better than you" by any means. And some people will look at you and say, "Well, you just think you're better because you're sober." And it's like, no, I'm better for me. I'm better for the world. I'm not better than you. That's not what I'm saying. But yes, you're absolutely right. So self-awareness was, one of your big focuses that you uh, answered to me when I asked you some upfront questions. And self awareness can mean a lot of different things. I think self awareness is one of those things that people hear a lot and may not totally understand. So I know that you've transitioned yourself into a bit of a being a recovery coach and working on that type of scenario. So let's talk about self awareness. What are some of the things that you do, other than your social media stuff, to be self aware, and what's some suggestions and advice for the listeners around how to be self aware and keep yourself in check?
I think anytime that you can look at a situation and figure out your part, like everything that happens to you is not your fault, but it is your responsibility. So even if you had shitty things happen to you, um, you still need to look at your part and how you can respond to that. And I think that self-awareness, like just in, I've learned a lot about self-awareness through sobriety, but then recently with going through the divorce and then had another relationship and a breakup, trying to I look back on where I made mistakes, where I was at fault, and working on those things, because everybody makes mistakes. everybody's doing things that could hurt somebody else, or everybody's making mistakes out there. And if I'm sitting here saying like, well, he did this and I'm crying because he did this, and over and over, and just focusing on what he had done, and not being like, you know what, though, I didn't set very good boundaries. Like, I was not clear on my boundaries about what I needed or what I wanted or what I expected. I was, I, like, just finding ways that you can better yourself from any situation, to me, is like that awareness and self growth.
I love that. That's awesome. Um, Now, you did mention earlier that after the twins, postpartum, and you know, I- how how much did that postpartum do you think throw you back into the drinking, and how fast? Because I in this recovery world, there's there's so many more females that are open and talk about this. And as me as a male that is pretty open about it, I get into a lot of mom groups, and so I hear about this so often. But I want to talk about postpartum, and some of the things that are happening in society. I think the timing, we don't have to go off on the today news post that's happened over the last few days, but talk about postpartum within the mom groups. Let's talk about mommy wine. How can people keep that in check in early recovery?
Um, that I mean, we are so brainwashed and conditioned to think that mommy needs wine, or not even mommy needs wine, just that alcohol's like a rite of adulthood, that we grow up, we go to school, we graduate, and then we enjoy our beer on the weekend. And that's just how life is. And I had alcohol use in my house growing up. I didn't have alcohol abuse, but I saw this example of, this is what we do. And they didn't get out of control, and they were responsible and whatever. And so when you are trying to follow the path of society, and then you're not fitting the mold, that's really hard to be rebellious and be like, you know what, that's not how I want to live. um but when it comes to like postpartum and stuff, that's a really, really sensitive time for a mom, and they are trying to survive. I mean, you get into that survival mode. And for me, after having this back and forth battle for so long, um I was so tired and exhausted from just and not just on that front. Nobody saw it. Nobody thought that that was going on. Everybody thought that, like, oh, she's doing so well with this. And I in a way, I was doing well. It was like, I've had kids before, I got this. It's like I got a routine. But just that, like, trapped and hopelessness. And when you have society saying like, you know what'll make you feel better is just drink, because that's what moms do. That's a really rebellious thing to decide not to do that. And so moms are badasses when they choose not to follow that path, I feel like. And I think that's really hard, though. And as much as I say that, I know that that's not, it's a lot easier said than done. Especially in that emotion, that time of your life that you are already feeling more down, you're already feeling in a darker place. But I think just really, really feeling proud of yourself for being a badass, for not going with the masses, like listening to yourself, to be like, you know what, this isn't serving me, this isn't right. And continuously, because it doesn't happen the first time you say that, like, how many times did we say we're never going to drink again? Like, I said it hundreds of times, but I kept waking up the next day and trying to take another step towards not drinking again. And so you have to just keep trying. You have to keep going. You have to keep pushing yourself. You have to go to therapy. If therapy doesn't work, go to a group, get in a Facebook group. I mean, you have to put in the work. It's not going to just happen, especially when society is going to keep pushing you towards the mommy needs wine lifestyle.
And so it was 1 year after the twins were born. You said right after their first birthday. That is when sobriety basically stuck for you. Um, so postpartum, you have a couple 1-year olds plus two other children. Um, you have society saying what it is. How did you do it at that point? We haven't quite touched on what that sobriety looked like. How did you do it? Where did you find the support? How did you handle um, the crisis that was going on? How did you do it?
I had to accept that if I didn't stop, something really bad was going to happen. The day that I quit, I actually drove into my garage and had suicidal thoughts again, that my kids would be better off without me. And then I started playing out like what would happen to them, where they would go. I mean, like planning their life for them without me in it. And that thought process scared me, because that thought process only came when I was drinking. And I thought, if I get drunk, I might do something I can't take back. And that moment of just accepting that, like, if I continue doing this, something bad is going to happen, whether it's a car accident or something happening with my kids because I'm passed out, or me actually harming myself. Something bad was going to happen. And so I first thing was I called my doctor and made an appointment to talk about getting into counseling. And then I started going to AA, and I went to AA every single day for a good 6, I never remember exactly how long, but for a while, 6 weeks, maybe, every day. Um, and AA was a great jumpstart for me. But then on my 90 days of alcohol free, I posted a blog about being alcohol free, and the response that I got from it. And it was very, very, very vanilla. It was very like, I've decided to take a step back from alcohol because it's not healthy. It was, it wasn't like I drove into my garage thinking I should kill myself. Um, so, but I did that post, and then the response I got was like people being like, that's so awesome, and people that didn't even know how bad it was, because I did so much of it behind the scenes. um and saying like, I want to quit too, I want, so then it was like that child in me that was used to love sharing and telling stories and was like on a stage all the time, was like, you know what, that comfortability with being on stage, I could use this to help people and help myself at the same time. And so that's what really made the switch into like, I'm going to just start sharing about this. And it just slowly got more and more open, to where now it's just like, I own my story and I am who I am. And yeah, that was the final straw.
And how do you manage the amount of people that now I'm sure do reach out to you? Because I'm sure that's got to be a pretty big number. And obviously you're there to support as much, but that can be overwhelming as well for you. So for anyone that does go out or is wanting to do this, like how do you handle that? Because I'm sure you're getting DMs not only from idiots that are there for the wrong reason, but all of the people that are there for the right reasons. How do you handle that stuff?
I try to respond as much as I can to messages, but I do have to set boundaries on the fact that, like, I am a mom of 4 boys, and I'm a single mom, and I work, and I would love to be able to just sit and chat with people all day long, but I'm one person with 50,000 people, and not all 50,000 will message me, but like so if one thing that I do see in my messages sometimes, which I want to point out, because I want people that do this to know that, like, we do see you, like, not, maybe we can't respond to all your messages, but saying it is still getting heard. There will be people that will message me that don't have anyone in their community, and they just want to tell somebody that they're sober, and I try really hard to get to those, but if I don't, like, I still encourage you guys to do that to people. Like, still go ahead and message, like, when you're proud of yourself and you don't feel like you can tell anyone around you. There's so many people in the sober influencer platform that would love to celebrate you. So reach out to us. But you have to understand too that, like, that I can't respond to every single message as much as as much as I would like to or try to. There are still like 99 plus in my request box.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Um, so let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about the AF2 brand. So where did that come from? How did you come up with the AF2 brand? So one, I want you to tell everybody what it is because I actually was today years old like last week when I actually figured out what it meant, and I'm like, how the hell did I not own every single piece of apparel that she has put out? This is amazing. So let's start with what AF2 is, and then just kind of give us a background of how you birthed that brand and kind of what your plans are with it.
So it's AF squared, and I am an accountant, right? So I'm a sober accountant, and I thought it was funny because people would always put sober AF, and I was like, are they saying sober alcohol free, or are they saying sober as, can I cuss? Say AF as
You
F
you
word.
definitely can cuss on this. It's explicit in all podcasts, so it is cool to say fuck, and fucking sobriety and recovery is one of my favorite things. So
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I told my kids it stands for and fun. So, but yeah, so I was like, I had noticed the hashtags, and it was making me laugh because I was like, we should just put AF squared because alcohol free AF. And um, I made a tank. I made a tank and I posted it, or I was wearing it. I posted it, and then people were like, "I want one. I want one." And then it just built from there. Like it was just totally me being a nerd. Like, and I love that it's not an like obvious alcohol free sober mom. And I not that there's anything wrong with the sober mom like sweatshirts and the zero proof sweatshirts, but I love that it's kind of like a little bit of a secret club, like you know it's AF squared. So I just, and then I just started creating different styles, and I like the the behind the scenes of trying to create different designs and doing different fun things, and all of it's just me having fun. So that's
It's
yeah, that's
awesome.
how it started.
No, I love it, and I have to get my shirt so that I can start cycling my shirts through because right now I wear this zero proof every episode, and I need to change that up. So we'll
Yeah,
work
I
on
have your sweatshirt.
we'll work on that. So um, something that you said in there that just made me think we haven't talked about this. Was with AF squared. You said I'm a CPA in numbers and I'm a nerd. What was drinking like for you in your professional world? Was that a thing for you as you were going through that progression of being a CPA in the professional world, and what did that look like?
I think being really busy with school and then studying for the CPA exam, it really helped keep the distraction, so that I wasn't partaking in too much. And I had kids at this time too. So the having something to work towards always seemed to help me not get too out of control or get too bad. But then when I switched jobs, and I wasn't studying for an exam, I wasn't having to learn anything new, and I think that's when it started to get a little bit worse. And then after the twins, for sure, that's when it got worse, and that's when they probably started to notice. They didn't know that I was drinking, they just thought I was off from having a busy year of birthing two humans. But um yeah, that definitely, the interesting thing too about being in school and studying for a CPA exam and feeling like a smart person. I mean, I feel like I'm fairly well educated. I can figure things out. That that thought process of being like I'm smart would always battle with my addiction of like, well, then you should be able to figure this out. Like you should be able to, like, smart people aren't addicts, which is so not true, but it's like that was a really hard thing for me to accept, that I could be smart and still be um, helpless when it came to addiction.
Yeah, that's very interesting because again, every time I do one of these, I think I learn something about myself. And it the corporate world for me is what I have found, the stress of it and just the rampantness of addiction in the corporate world. I I think I actually battled that whole thing of I'm an intelligent person. What the hell am I doing? And it was a vicious cycle that you just I think you just clicked a light bulb on for me. So something to go work on, I suppose now. So that's awesome. I love that. Um, so we've covered a lot here. One thing that I do want to talk about before we close out is how do you talk to and communicate, and how big of a part is addiction and your recovery? How big's that story with your kids? How and how do you go about that?
I'm open with my kids about it. My oldest son, they and my oldest two, they remember nights of me drinking or situations where mom was drunk or passed out early. So we're really open about it. And I want to keep that communication open. I mean, I know different parents takes different like takes on how on if we should be exposing our kids to things or if we need to be sheltering them from things. And I have more of an approach of like, they are going to walk into this world, and my job is to prepare them for that. And they're already going to get so much information from video games, from YouTube, from their friends, I mean, the amount of things that could be influencing our kids right now is so much more than when we were kids. And so I feel like I want to be one of those people influencing my kids. I want my house to be a sober household where we have fun and dance and do things because we're sober, not because mommy had too much wine that night and she's dancing on the table. It's like, no, we're just having fun. We can have fun sober. And we talk, and they know that I run a sober page, and they know that I share my story about sobriety. They know about my shirts. We've talked about when there's peer pressure. My middle son has some really bad separation anxiety right now, and I got him in counseling, and we're working on that because it's like I want to catch all those things before drugs and alcohol are introduced. So it's like remember when we had anxiety and we worked through it and we felt really good after we worked through it. Before it's like, oh, he'll be okay, and then alcohol comes, and then it's like, oh wow, that numbed it, so now we're good. So we have really, really open communication in our household, maybe too much sometimes because they like to like talk to me while they're pooping, but but
I
that's
saw
just
I saw the post last night as you were eating your salad and he was pooping, and it was so funny because I immediately sent it to my wife and I said, "This look familiar?" And she's like, "Oh, that is just our life right now." Because I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, and that's how it goes. Doors open, they're just doing what they want to do. And if there's anyone listening that doesn't follow Gentry, go follow her. This is your time to go do it because dancing on tables in a sober household is pretty much about every other post that she does. So that coffee table in your house gets quite the workout, and I absolutely love it. So you do incredible stuff. So one of the things that I do at the end of each episode is I give you the floor and give you the platform to basically just say to the early recovery, the sober curious, the long term recovery, just your message and what do you want to say to those folks?
oh, every obstacle in your life is an opportunity. So you might be coming up on an obstacle if you're trying to get sober, if you're sober curious, or even if you're already sober and you're coming up on obstacles. Every obstacle in your life is an opportunity. And so see it as an opportunity, see what you can learn from it, see how you can grow from it, and keep going. Like just keep going.
Powerful stuff. This has been awesome. Gentry, thank you for joining me on the Sobriety Matters podcast. I know it's hard to find an hour in the day to come on to these types of things. I'm extremely grateful. You have a wonderful story. You have an amazing platform that you're building that community on, and I hope that we see nothing more than for that to grow. And I again can't say enough for you taking the time out of your day to come onto the podcast. So I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.